I'm Anthony Elmore, President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association practice the Buddhist teachings as taught by the 13th century Japanese Buddhist sage Nichiren Shoshu. It is Nichiren Shoshu who teaches us that it is the Lotus Sutra that is the highest of the Buddha's teachings. Now, my lecture today is SGI leaders Daisaku Ikeda's Racist Buddhist Teachings that extricate all black history, culture, and language from Buddhism. Daisaku Ikeda wrote a book. It's called The Living Buddha. Now, when I read the Daisaku Ikeda book, The Living Buddha, I had to take my exit from the SGI. Now, in the book, The Living Buddha, now, quote, this is what Daisaku Ikeda writes. He writes, "Finally, I do not think it is possible to determine for certain the racial origin of Shakyamuni, who lived so many centuries ago. It cannot be denied in ways of thinking associated with Buddhism. There are characteristics that strongly suggest some connection with Indo-Aryan culture, people and their culture. Whatever the racial origin of their founder, there is not doubt that Buddhism grew up in an Indo-Aryan cultural sphere." Unquote. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to the average person who reads this is a racist buzzword when you write that Shakyamuni Buddha grew up in an Indo-Aryan cultural sphere. See, this is what black people must understand. Daisaku Ikeda is not just making a casual statement about Buddhism. What Daisaku Ikeda is teaching is that Buddhism is a white religion with no black Buddhist history. See, Daisaku Ikeda writes in this fictional account of the Buddha. Now, the book is called The Living Buddha. This is not even a true historical account. He writes a fictional account of the Buddha Shakyamuni, but in his book, or in his fictional book, he espouse a philosophy of white superiority. See, the Living Buddha, when he writes, whatever the racial origin of their founder, there is not doubt that Buddhism grew up in an Indo-Aryan cultural sphere. Ladies and gentlemen, this is deep. See, what Daisaku Ikeda is teaching is a racist partial truth. See, what Daisaku Ikeda does, it dismisses black Buddhist history that extended over 500 years after the death of the Buddha. See, the Buddha was born in Magadha. Now, the Magadha Empire was founded by black people, and its founder was Naga. Please understand that 150 years prior to the birth of the Buddha, it was the Greek Homer who wrote, India was known at the time of Homer as Eastern Ethiopia. Even when we go 150 years to the father of history, that was Herodotus. Herodotus wrote that there were two Ethiopias, one east of the Red Sea and one west of the Red Sea. Please understand that the Buddhists were Naga. Now, look at the picture of the Naga Buddha. You will see the Naga Buddhas with the Naga snake You will see the snakes. You will see this in Egypt. You will see the Naga in Africa. See, what you have to understand is that in India, the black people were called Naga. Now, in Africa, they were called Nubian. Now, it was Herodotus who wrote that the city of Meroe was the place where the Gymnosophist, it was the height of the Gymnosophist. See, people were not called Buddhist at the time. The word Buddhist or Buddha is a relatively modern term. Now, back in the day of Buddhism, they were called Gymnosophists. See, the word gym means naked, and sophist meant philosophers, so they were called Gymnosophists. You can look at a picture of Alexander the Great with Buddhists, but he was not with Buddhists, he was with the Gymnosophists when Alexander tried to conquer India. Now, many white people often say, what difference does it make whether the Buddha was black or white? Now, I am clear to white people. It is a big difference because we are talking about racism and the rewrite of history. Now, let me be clear. There was no Indo-Aryan influence of Buddhism until about 100 years into the AD, until the birth of Mahayana Buddhism. Now, see, one of the things that we must understand about India, and I want you to look at the picture. India, or ancient India, comes from the Harappan culture. The Harappans, or the ancient Indians, were black people. There is archaeological, anthropological, genetic science, literary science that tells about the history and culture of India, and we can pinpoint exactly when whites came into India. India, the word India means black, and there were no white people actually into India really until the AD. Now, it was well into the AD, or 1900 years ago, when racism started. See, the birth of racism was the caste system that started in India. Now, it was under the white Kushan king Kanishka when the Buddha changed from black to white, and it was with the start of Mahayana Buddhism, where Buddhism was separated by race, culture, and language. Now, I want you to take a look at the Gandhara images that was commissioned by King Kanishka. What King Kanishka did, because he was the white king who had conquered India, he had his carvers to carve images of the Buddha, and he carved the images of the Buddha to look Greek. You will see all the images of the Buddha. Now, one of the things about the images of the Buddha that you were clear about is that King Kanishka gave them white hair. Look at this picture of the Buddha, of the Greek Buddha, because he was of the Greek ancestry, and you will see the hair on the Buddha is straight hair. Now, prior to that, or if you look around the world and you see images of the Buddha, you always see the black hair. This is how we know that the Buddha was black, because the black hair is going to be curly. Now, also understand, let's look at Buddhist history. Now, in the 4th century, in 29 BC, in 29 BC, they had what was called the 4th Buddhist Council. Now, at the 4th Buddhist Council, this happened in Ceylon, which is today known as Sri Lanka. Now, in the 4th Buddhist Council, they got together and put the Buddhist teachings in writing. Now, when they put the Buddhist teachings in writing, they came up with what is called the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is 13 times larger than the Bible. Now, in 29 BC, they wrote in the Pali Canon about the Black Buddhist of Africa. See, the Black Buddhist lived in Miro in Africa. And the Pali Canon, or the Buddhist writings, mentions about black people. See, what you have to understand, that Daisaku Ikeda said the Buddha grew up in an Indo-Aryan cultural spirit. Now, we have to be clear, at the time of the Buddha, and for 500 years after the Buddha, there was no such thing as an Indo-Aryan cultural spirit, because black people practice Buddhism. Like, we can go to the time of Alexander, when Alexander faced the Nandas. Now, he bagged away because these brothers had like 80,000 elephants, and Alexander was not a soldiers were too afraid to go in there and challenge these people. Now, after Alexander, the Nandas were conquered by the Muriams. Now, the Muriams was another black empire. They were called the Muriams. Now, one of the famous Buddhists that was in the Muriam Empire was King Asoka, who sent edifice. He did carvings, and he sent carvings all around the world, and you could see the Asoka edicts. Now, I want you to look at a picture of the Aphrodite Temple in Naga, Sudan. This is in Sudan, or Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt. You will see the Asoka edict. Please understand that Buddhism was in Africa 1,000 years before it ever even got to China or Japan. So when you hear about, or you read that a Daisaku Ikeda says that Buddhism or the Buddha come up in an Indo-Aryan cultural spirit, you can understand that what Daisaku Ikeda is promoting is white Buddhism, or white cultural and Asian cultural imperialism. See, let me explain something to you. You see, this man in his writings said the most stupid thing you ever want to hear in your life. He says, we cannot determine the racial origin of Shakyamuni, who lived some 3,000 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. There exists no people 3,000 years ago that we cannot tell their racial origins because of science. See, let me explain. We have archaeology. Archaeology, apparently, many of the black SGI members don't understand, but archaeology is the study of human activity through the recovery and analysis of material culture. The archaeological records consist of artifacts, architecture, biofacts, ecofacts, and cultural landscapes. See, all of this that we're talking about. See, we can show you an artifact of Magada. We can show you the architecture. We can show you the biofacts, the ecofacts, the landscapes. See, we have pictures. See, it is ignorant for a Daisaku Ikeda to tell you that we could not tell the racial origins when we have a science called archaeology. Now, just to show you how stupid what Daisaku Ikeda writes, even if archaeology fails us, we have a science called anthropology. Now, anthropology is the study of various aspects of humans within past and present societies. Social anthropology and cultural anthropology study the norms and values of society. Now, linguistic anthropology studies how language affects. Now, we have anthropological evidence that proves that the Buddha was black. We don't have to listen to some Daisaku Ikeda who only talks about 3,000 years. That is nonsense. We can go back with science and tell about cultures millions of years ago. Now, we have what is called genetic science. Now, genetic science is the study of genes, genetic variation, and heredity in living organisms. It is generally considered a field of biology, but it intersects frequently with many of the life sciences and is strongly linked with the study of information systems. We have the technology to determine the racial origins of Shakyamuni Buddha, despite what Daisaku Ikeda writes. Now, let's go further. We also have literary science. Now, scientific literate comprises scholarly publications that report original, empirical, and theoretical work in the natural and social sciences and within an academic field, often abbreviated as the literature. We have literary science that state the racial origins of the Buddha Shakyamuni. For example, there is a book called the Royal Asiatic Society of Ireland and Britain. Now, this is a free book that you can Google. You had the top scholars in Europe to write about India. They left books. There's a book called The Anaclipsis. It is a book that was written by Sir Godfrey Higgins in 1833, which he tells that the Buddha was black. This, ladies and gentlemen, let's put it this way here. Godfrey Higgins writes that all the ancient icons show that the Buddha was black. Just look at any Buddha statue. Those that were not written but carved, that's archaeological evidence, and all of them show the black hair. Their hair just like mine. Now, we can also go right to 6th century AD in the ancient capital of Japan in Nara. There is a temple called Toda-ji Temple that was in the ancient Japanese capital. The Japanese emperor's name was Shomu, and they built the largest indoor statue of the Buddha in the world. The largest indoor statue of the Buddha is in the world, and it's in the ancient capital of Nara. In that Buddha statue, you see a black Buddha at the temperature Toda-ji. This is called the Cosmic Buddha. This is a UNESCO, a United Nations World Heritage Site, and you see the black Buddha right there, and then you have a Daisaku Ikeda who takes a fictional book and he tries to rewrite history by saying we cannot tell the racial background of the Buddha, or he came up in the Indo-Aryan cultural spirit, when we can look at the artifacts and see this is not true. I am Anthony Elmore, President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association, bringing you a lecture. SGI leader Daisaku Ikeda, Racist Buddhist History. Thank you very much.